It's encouraging to see how much more attention is being given to mental wellness in the workplace. This certainly wasn't the case when I started my career in safety just a few years ago. Now, I'm not a mental health professional, but I've seen how personal stress can affect the worker's ability to stay safe in the workplace, especially if there's been a serious incident. Oftentimes you learn about other things that are going on in somebody's mind after they've gotten injured. And of course, that's the wrong time to find that out. There's often more going on in somebody's life than we all realize. So this year marks my 46th year in health and safety, and yes, I started when I was 12. But recently I read something that struck me. It was really the first time I'd ever seen this in one of the professional journals, and that was a safety professional was diagnosed with PTSD after investigating a serious workplace fatality. I've had the misfortune of investigating many serious accidents and 2 fatalities in my career. Even though those events happened a long time ago, I still wake up in the middle of the night and try to figure out exactly what happened and what we could have done to prevent it. Don't think I got PTSD, but it is something that certainly has an effect on me. We often associate mental health challenges with the military and law enforcement or emergency services, but trauma doesn't care what your job title is. It can affect anyone in any workplace. And I think we're seeing that today with some of the workplace violence sort of things that are going on. It really has an effect on people's overall mental well-being. I'm grateful that my employer provides mental health resources. Just like physical injuries, early recognition and support are the key to recovery. I don't think everybody's so fortunate to have a place that has things like an EAP and other activities that go on to try to support not only our physical well-being, but our mental well-being as well. And I for one appreciate that. As a safety professional, we're trained to spot physical hazards, but we can't ignore the invisible ones. A truly safe workplace supports both the body and mind. By talking openly about mental health, we can help individuals heal, and we strengthen our safety culture even more. So that's what I've got for you tonight. Have a great weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, now we're at the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, with that, we'll go to open comment. Aaron, do we have anybody on the open comment?
There is one person signed up, Chris Acuna.
Okay. Thank you. And we try to keep it to 2 minutes. So, great. Good, thank you. Thank you. Next up is, I think Todd's going to be talking about the bids for lead service.
Item 4A on your agenda tonight is a recommendation to award a contract to Carl Bolander and Sons for the 2025 lead service line replacement project. We're excited to be here tonight. There was a lot of effort to get to this point in the process, and I just have a few slides to give a quick overview of the scope, the schedule, the cost and funding, and then a little bit of stats on where we see the project or the program overall going over the next 4 years. So this project is primarily funded from state and federal grant funds administered by the Public Facilities Authority at the state level. And that grant funding comes with certain conditions. One of those is that we have to have a prioritization process for where we begin and how we move through our service district in replacing lead services. The map on the left is U.S. Census blocks within Rochester, and two criteria that we use to prioritize these areas. One is the population of children under 5 in terms of acute health effects from lead exposure with young children. And the second criteria is the median household income. So those two criteria go into a formula, and we end up assigning a score up to a maximum of 10 points for prioritization. Yellow is 10, orange is 9, purple is 8, and so on. The map on the right is the 3 top census blocks that we have identified for the 2025 project area. So the yellows are 10, the orange is priority 9. It makes for some rather unusual project boundaries, but they really are based on U.S. Census blocks in the prioritization process that we're required to follow. So we began, there are hundreds of properties within each one of these census blocks, and we research each one of the properties to determine what type of material they have for a water service to the homes. We were able to narrow that down with our records down to 131 properties for which they were either lead, galvanized, or we simply don't know what the material is. We are dealing with inspection records from 80 to 100 years ago. They're a little bit hit and miss, probably not to the standards that we are today always, but we're pleased to at least get it down to 131 properties. That set us on a course of doing investigations for each one of those properties. So we either worked with the homeowner to get inside and inspect the service in the basement, or we actually bored vertical shafts over the water services near the curb box in the front yard, and we're able to visually identify and verify what the material types were for those services. Through that process, we were actually able to get it down to 45 properties. So about 35% of the properties within the initial package of potential locations ended up being verified as lead and galvanized. So with that, we prepared plans and specs, advertised for bids in August. We opened bids on September 19th, and Carl Bolander and Sons was the bid at $1,171,590. Bolander is an experienced contractor with lead service line replacements. They are large enough that they have the capacity to do this project, and we've had conversations, sent the bidding. They're ready to get started by October 13th, and the completion date is December 19th. This is a very tight window, but it is a relatively small project with only 45. So we expect to get done. It feels a bit rushed, but we really believe at a staff level how important it is to at least stand up and get started on a program this year. There were a lot of kinks and processes to establish developing the program, and we've made it here tonight, which is a success on staff's behalf. So we're excited to push forward. Total project cost, including engineering, field investigations, we have contingencies built in there, was $1,668,070. This will be covered, like I'd mentioned, through a grant from the Public Facilities Authority, and we will be reimbursed upon completion of the project. You may have recalled back in January, the board, had originally approved the master grant agreement in the project order form. We do have the master grant agreement signed, fully executed, so that's ready to go. PFA is going to complete the project order now that we have bids, assuming the project gets awarded tonight. And so we should be set to move forward with the project. There were a couple of changes, though, during our review of records. Back in January, we described the number of known lead services and galvanized services, as you see on the screen, about 250 to 270. Those numbers haven't changed a lot since January. What has changed is the number of unknowns. Back in January, we believed that number to be about 800. Today, it is 2,600, and I know that's a big jump, but one of the main objectives of this program is to not leave a lead service behind. We can't make mistakes. We have to be very careful. There were some assumptions last year as the original inventory was being developed about what year was the last year that lead services were allowed to be installed in Rochester. We've since revised that to 1979. We know after 1979, the city required water services to be constructed with type K copper services, so non-lead or galvanized. We think that over the next year, that number will come down quite a bit as we're doing additional research and record reviews. But that's where we stand today. We are excited to start small at only 45 services. We hope to scale up to about 200 services next year, and ideally I'd like to see us get done by 2027, if not 2028. I don't think the grant funding is going to hold out much longer than that at the state. We've had conversations here just in the last couple of weeks, and all cities are being quite aggressive in going after this money and trying to get projects delivered. So the one other thing I wanted to mention, so this is all part of the lead and copper rule through the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. That is why we are doing this. We are required, public utilities are required to pursue these projects. The grant funding is set forth to help us do that. But there are other requirements in the lead and copper rule. One of them is sampling, so that we're monitoring the levels of lead and copper in drinking water. This has to be done at customer service taps inside their home because a great source of lead is from the service between the water main and in the house. We're required to sample every 3 years. Rochester, based on the size of our system, we have to collect 50 samples on a 3-year cycle, and they have to be Tier 1 sites. This was the first year that we had to do Tier 1 sites, meaning sites that we believe are lead and galvanized, not just randomly selecting. So we were a little nervous about what the results were going to be, but they came back about a month ago, and we're required to have the 90th percentile for lead to be less than 15 parts per billion, or 0.15 milligrams per liter. For copper, the 90th percentile needs to be below 1,300 parts per billion. We've done very well. There's tables on the slide that show the results. 48 of those samples for lead were below actually 10 parts per billion. One did exceed 15 parts per billion, but just by a little bit. We've already been in contact with that property owner to notify them of the results. I did list that window 10 to 15 parts per billion because in 3 years, when the sampling frequency comes around again, we're going to be under new governance rules by the lead and copper conditions, and that action level is going to drop from 15 parts per billion down to 10. So assuming the results are similar in 3 years, we should still be in good compliance, but it's just an example of how regulatory requirements are continuing to be more stringent for water supplies. Copper, all results were less than 1,300 parts per billion. In fact, all but one was less than 1,000 parts per billion. So we've got good compliance. My hope is that by 2028, when we are in the next 3-year cycle, we're going to have a hard time finding lead services to test, but that's just a goal of mine. So in your packets, there's a resolution awarding a contract to Carl Bolander and Sons, and I'm certainly available for any questions you might have.
Yeah, I appreciate seeing this move along. I have been in touch with residents who have been contacted, but they're not in these zones. That implies that we've been doing more work to do the discovery of whether it's lead or not. This was work on the unknowns. Is that, there's been work on the unknowns done outside of the zones that we're contracting for right now?
There has been a little bit. I think we're really trying to exhaust anything we can do with records research because trying to make appointments and getting into basements is difficult. Certainly boring holes in front yards are expensive. One thing that we hope, we have a good website set up now, so people with questions can at least get the basics. There's nice videos on there to short explanation. But we do want to get a 3-year schedule, so when someone is notified that they have a lead service, they can go on the website and see which year we expect them to be replaced.
Okay. I guess what I was looking for is, one of the things that we dealt with early on was we have lead, we have things that are not lead, and we have unknowns. And I think we're making progress on the unknowns beyond this contract.
We are. And in fact, assuming things go well tonight, we will engage our consultant to start with 2026 here in a couple of weeks, and they will start to do that research for next year. We want to be here having this conversation for the 26 project in March.
Yes.
Not at the end of September.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
I would move approval of accepting the bid on the resolution as presented on packet page 30.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion?
No, just a vote of confidence. I'm glad to see us doing, I mean, I know there's a lot of upfront work to do, and I know I've been hearing that's going on, but the fact that we're going to be having a list of 40 done really is impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate the systematic approach and being able to stand this up so quickly. Nice work.
Agreed. Thank you. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. With that, we'll be going to legislative priorities under our information with Tim.
Very good. Good afternoon, almost evening. Taking a slightly different approach this year on reviewing legislative priorities. If you recall last year about this time, I had just one slide in my GM report talking towards a few key legislative priority issues. Wanted to do a more thorough job this year and actually write out policy positions. I think that's part of the role that you are asking of management, myself, to form those opinions, share them with you. And so tonight's information item is really about vetting those with you all, getting some initial feedback on these policy positions. There was a paper attached to the FBA that described each of the key issues and suggested policy positions on those. I can just talk about them at a high-level summary here. Heather Corcoran, who's our Legislative Affairs Director for the city, is also here. We work very closely together in bringing these together with the overall city legislative priorities that then influences how we take our message to both the Capitol in the state and the Capitol in DC as well. So I do want to highlight a lot of good work happening. There will be an expected bonding priority this year related to East Zumbro water and sewer infrastructure. And I flipped those words because I think about water first there, but it's sewer and water. This is to enable housing construction in the southeast portion of the city. There's some significant sanitary trunk line upsizing that needs to be done and some associated water main work there as well. When we first considered this, or when Public Works first considered this project, we paired up with them very quickly, recognizing that there's needed water improvements along the whole corridor. So we do expect this to be considered by council in the bonding request this year. This is a good news item for us. If it's supported, there's already been a federal application for support of this project. This would really unlock a lot of housing opportunities in Southeast Rochester, as well as fund some major infrastructure for us that would not necessarily have to be rate funded as well. Am considering taking another run at the sales tax exemption that was on our policy list last year. It wasn't supported. I don't think any sales tax exemptions were supported in the last legislative session. Did have several good conversations with legislators about that. We had great sponsorship from Senator Carla Nelson in that and bringing it to the Senate, and there was a House associated bill as well. We worked with our local delegates on that. So I intend to bring that back forward this year. It is scalable. It's something that we could, if there's an appetite for any of those, we could make that work. It would offset some future costs on our advanced metering project. Full value of that one was about $700,000 of reduced sales tax that we will otherwise pay on the purchasing the electric advanced meters. The water meters are exempt by statute. So we just have to pay sales tax on one side of the project, but the water meters communicate over the electric meters. They're really an integral system together. That's the basis of the ask there. Transmission investment right of first refusal. This is a big policy discussion happening right now. You'll hear from Scott here shortly, probably before the end of the year, and an update on our Grid North Partners investment in what's called Tranche 1. We've already been offered the right of first refusal on a Tranche 2.1 project, which we've taken initial steps with those partners on. In Tranche 2.1, we're hoping to get a load ratio share. This would be how much of the cost of those projects that we would pay for in our rates. We're wanting that level of investment opportunity to help offset our costs in that. Right now, that would be $60 million in Tranche 2.1. As it is today, we're sitting with an opportunity of about $2 million of investment. So we would like more investment opportunity in Tranche 2.1. But the way the rules of ROFR are written, you have to own the substations to get rights to own lines on the other side of the substations. We primarily have line ownership. And so when it comes to some of the bigger investments like the 760 kV lines that are contemplated, right now ROFR doesn't give us the ability to make investments in those because we don't own the substation on the other side. We're proposing a position here that would give smaller municipal power agencies like ourselves, like SIMPA, like others who don't own the substations, by statute requirements for a load ratio share investment opportunity, kind of force the issue for us. If that isn't supported, we may be in no worse off position by letting ROFR go away, because we would at least then have an opportunity to competitively bid a project with other competitive bid partners. So this is a bigger policy issue here. I just wanted to vet that out. Our transmission investment strategy here is critical to our future and our opportunities there. This is not a new concept. Several of our other partners in these have made attempts of this nature before. So wanted to vet that out before we took any strong positions there about trying to preserve our investment rights in transmission. You all know the difficulty of securing capacity. And so this was a novel idea. I believe actually it originated from our board president, Malachi. As he came to understanding of how certificate of need processes work, he recognized that we work under the definition of large energy facility, which is in statute 50 megawatts. He suggested, why don't we just double that? Why don't we consider small a little bit bigger? And so it's a novel approach to maybe creating additional flexibility to build some capacity projects at the small scale. And so that's really the essence of that policy position, is defining a large energy facility slightly larger that would enable firm capacity projects to be built, maybe more of them to be built. Net metering reform, this was a large topic of the session last year. There was a bill discussed on both sides of the aisle about net metering reform to try and have some reforms on the full net metering rules. This can be a very divisive issue here. I have had the opportunity to speak with a couple legislators on both sides of the aisle about this policy, and there is some forming support about recognizing we do need to reform net metering. As it is today, we have customers that can size solar arrays up to 300% to 400% size their load. And so with full retail net metering, they can offset more than their bill and use that as a revenue generating opportunity. I believe there's a fair necessity in the future as we go to 100% renewable electricity for all. The need of a subsidy for something like net metering may need to wane, and then we can scale it up further. So that net metering policy has some implications as well I wanted to get some feedback on. Touch on a couple more. We talked about nuclear power last year. We were going to take a supportive position. We did work that through the council. It was on our legislative agenda last year. There was no real bills of substance that made it through to have that conversation, but we would be in a similar position here this year if there's any traction for that. The proposed reforms to the ECO Act, there are a lot of investments that we believe we need to make in demand response and other type of load shifting measures that aren't currently recognized in the ECO Act rules. And so it's suggested by our team to work on some reforms to enable the ECO Act that is the basis for our conservation incentive program to be expanded and streamlined a bit to reduce some of the administrative burdens there as well. And federal level, Energy Star, that program, at least in the short term, has lost its funding. And so it's also the basis of many of our rebate programs. The Energy Star label is an important piece of our rebate qualifications, so we're advocating at the federal level. I'll stop there. If there's any feedback, objections, comments, otherwise, I'd love to take that, and we would then, as a next step, incorporate this into the overall city positions. That would go in front of council, I believe, in October. Heather, is that about right? Yeah. So I'll pause there and see if there's any feedback from the board.
Question?
Yes.
No, I looked like Patrick had.
Just on that, the 50 mega for a large.
Yep.
You benchmark other states. Is it all over the map, or is it very similar?
Not many states in my assessment have the same certificate of need process that the Minnesota PUC has in place. So it's tougher to find model legislation to compare this specific definition around. And that's a very narrow definition about electric generating units. Even battery storage units have a different sizing threshold. So this would just be narrowly on effectively allowing peaking facilities to be built.
Okay.
If,
And we were always working under the limit of the 50.
Yeah.
So that's why it's interesting to me. But is there any transmission implications on that too?
No, not here. The transmission has its own definitions of transmission voltage and lengths that need to go through certificate of need. So this one is just electric generating. It's the definition of an electric generating unit there.
I'm good with the list. My feedback would be, and again, I like when we align and have like the same list with the other city things with the sewer utility and things like that. There are others outside of legislative. There's other utility things that when we go to our federal or state talking about, the backlog for those, I thought I'd see that in here and I didn't.
So we typically take our issues, we bring them to our Municipal Utilities Association, MMUA. They gather feedback from all the membership, and sometimes we're in strong alignment with those and we have no objections to them. Sometimes we might hold a contrary position to the broader group there. So the next step for us is I wanted to get at least initial feedback from staff and the board, and then we would start working with MMUA and other policy groups just to see if this is aligned with where they're at, whether we would be in a supportive position or not. So there will be other issues that are the topic of the association, and we sometimes just sit in the sidelines and allow the association to take the lead on those. We typically, if we're in a contrary position, don't take a strong, we don't go against the association there, but if it's an important issue for us, we would. ROFR might be one of those, and so that's one where last year ROFR has always been support ROFR, prevent the repeal of ROFR, and as you see in this document, we're taking a position that may be contrary to other municipal partners on this one.
Right, okay. Yeah, no, I'm appreciate the work going into this, and I'm good with what you've presented.
Great.
So I had a question on that. First of all, thank you for the format of this. It's very detailed, thought out. I like the update. Regarding ROFR, I can see why we would have the position we had for, our first choice, and what to modify that to become. I would like to learn just a little bit more about why, as our second choice, we would just prefer to get rid of it. I'm assuming we've done the analysis in that there wouldn't be so much competition, it would price us out from being able to participate.
So I'll start. Scott, you're welcome to weigh in here as well. Scott handles most of our transmission policy development work. If option one is it would be supported and we could be granted a load ratio share, what that would effectively do is force those who have the investment rights in these big projects to share a little bit of it with the other load serving entities like us. So it would take us from a $2 million investment to a $60 million investment and match our load ratio share. If that reform doesn't happen, we're stuck at $2 million. And we're stuck at the opportunity we have to negotiate with the other partners. We've had limited success in negotiating some of those positions. So really the fallback option too is kind of if we don't see the reforms, we get no investment rights, we're probably in a better position to let the competitive bid market come into Minnesota, and then we could partner with some of them and then we could be one of the competitive bid partners on
Okay.
that. So it would actually open the door for us to invest in a competitive market.
So it wouldn't be us in a vacuum.
It would not be us in a vacuum, and we wouldn't be of the scale of an organization to take a lead position in developing a large line like that. It would be partnering with another competitive bid entity. For example, in Wisconsin, there is a competitive bid market there, and entities like Dairyland Power Cooperative are partnering up with other entities, private entities in some case, and they're putting in competitive bid projects, and they're, that market is there in a competitive state where it would open the door for us as well. I'm getting a thumbs up that I described it well enough that Scott's happy with me, so. Okay, I appreciate the feedback. Anything else before we put the topic to bed?
No?
Great.
Okay, the next item is the customer research study, and I'm thinking, Tim, you're going to introduce Michael from Great Blue Research?
I will. Thank you for that start. Michael from Great Blue Research is here to present the full analysis on our research study. And thank you and welcome, and we look forward to the results.
All right, how's that? You can hear me better now? All right. Do you need me to start again or just keep going? Okay. You got it. So high-level overview of the study is we completed nearly 1,900 completed surveys, 1,819 residential surveys, 60 commercial surveys for a total of 1,879, with 3 major areas that we were focusing on from areas for investigation, which are rating the utility, awareness and perception of renewable goals, rates and understanding, and then also residential demographics as well as commercial firmographics, and really making sure that we had a reflective sample in the study that we did. Jumping into those areas for investigation in a little more depth, we really wanted to understand, kind of customer ratings on RPU's organizational characteristics, and these range from communication, responsiveness, reliability, service, value, environmental responsibility, staff helpfulness, and overall satisfaction. And these studies, or these characteristics, are consistent among public power research that we're doing across the United States. We also are the preferred research partner for the American Public Power Association, so we run the public power data source, which is essentially the way more affordable version of the J.D. Power's investor-owned study. So we are capturing comparable results for public power utilities across the United States, and these are all in there. Important, in addition to that, there's the relative importance of RPU's 5 Rs, which are reliability, rates, responsibility, relationships, and reputation. We wanted to identify customer trust in RPU's financial decisions and the awareness of opportunities for community input, awareness and support for RPU's 100% net renewable electricity goal by 2030 and the Minnesota carbon-free standard by 2040, customer preferences between the accelerated 2030 pathway or a more gradual 2040 pathway, including associated rate impacts, interest in participating in RPU's voluntary carbon offset program through renewable energy certificates or RECs, and then perceptions of RPU's current rates, fairness, and comparability to other Minnesota utilities. So that was really, if you think about a table of contents or chapters in a book, those were the chapters that we were really after in this particular study. And the high level, when you think walking out of that, we saw that about 7 in 10 customers reported satisfaction with RPU. On a slide, I'm going to show you what that national number looks like in a moment, but I won't make you wait. It's about 62%. So from a national perspective, your customers are rating you higher than what we're seeing is the national average, with the strongest marks for staff's helpfulness and responsiveness. And then commercial customers also rated RPU slightly higher than their residential counterpart. Strategic priorities, customers emphasize without question rates and reliability as the 2 key most important priorities, well ahead of other focus areas, and I'll show you numerically what that looks like. As I mentioned before, the gentleman ahead of me already kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, but 70.6% support the current goal of 100% net renewable electricity by 2030. You'll also see once you start to introduce rate impacts and those sorts of things, you start to see the majority of folks really start to prefer a more gradual or slower rollout over time. And this is pretty consistent of what we see nationally as well. There is nobody questions the importance, but what people do start to question is the impact on their wallets. And then it's prioritization, no different than how we prioritize our budgets at home and in our business. There's some trade-offs. And so what we saw as the rate impacts were considered, folks started to really kind of consider that slower rollout. With respect to the carbon offset program or the RECs, we saw 1 in 3 customers are interested in participating. When you start to factor in a cost for participating, that interest weans off a little bit more. And then last but not least, rates and understanding. Just over half of RPU's rates view RPU's rates as reasonable, but only 1/3 understand how rates are set, signaling a need for greater transparency and education. And let me kind of take a second on that and provide a little bit of context. So inevitably, when you'll see in a slide here in a few that there's pretty strong comfort with your rates, and usually that means that there's a value for the perceived cost. So as your folks tell you that rates and reliability are most important, they're seeing the high level of reliability, therefore the rates kind of align with what those expectations are. As we dive further into that, and there's a higher level of trust, which you also have, that means they're not paying as much attention to how rates are generated, how you compare to others. But as you start to get into rolling out scenarios like this, where if we want to stick on the 2030 path, there's a cost associated with that. If we want to go on the 2040 path, there's a slightly lower cost associated with that. People start to pay attention. Ultimately, education on how rates are defined, and most importantly, all that you are doing as a utility to keep rates low and consistent and give the greatest value is really important communication. As this goes on, will be most important communication for your customers and identifying that. And to give you an example, in Connecticut, we went through that where we're from, and this was after kind of the deregulation, 10-year contracts came in, and we were seeing 50% rate increases, and there's 2 IOUs in Connecticut. One was really proactive about communication and educating folks on how rates worked and how they're created and the impact of different things. And the other chose to just kind of sit on the sideline and said, well, we're going to get beat up for this anyway. What we saw was about an 18 percentage point decrease in the customer satisfaction index number for the one utility that sat on the sidelines. For the utility that was proactive in their communication about how rates were designed and the impact of these 10-year contracts, they saw a 4 percentage point decline in their CSI despite a 50% rate increase. So I can't stress the importance, and that will come out as one of our recommendations, the importance of really educating folks on rates, what goes into them, how they're defined, and it's something you'll have to repeat multiple times before it kicks in. I've been doing this for 26 years, and my wife still asks me how rates are created. So I don't know if that's I'm describing it poorly or she's just not listening to me, but that's an argument for another day. So as we start to look at some of the key study findings, and I'll kind of zip through these fairly quickly, but these are all of those different organizational characteristics. As you'll see on the right side of the screen, 65.2% is the national year-to-date public power satisfaction average, and you all are at 69.1%, so 70% collectively. As you start to have an interaction with somebody at RPU, notably helpful and knowledgeable staff, responding promptly to customer questions and or complaints, maintaining modern and reliable infrastructure, those numbers jump up over 3/4 or 7 out of 10 folks. So really good ratings here. Systematically, as folks become more educated on these different topics, all tides rise together. When we get into those 5 R's for you all, and we really kind of highlighted the top 2, there it is. The top 2 boxes here, rates is that top line, and you saw 48.4% said that was their first rank. So they had the ability to rank all of these 5 R's on a scale of 1 to 5 in that order, and all of the dark blue shaded areas on this really reflect what the first ranking was given, and nearly half gave rates that first ranking, 2/5 gave reliability that ranking, and then it really drops off. Responsibility is 10.2%, relationships and reputation as a first rank or even below that. So your customer base is very clear on what's important to them and where the priorities are, and it is in fact rates and reliability. So that becomes a big part of the conversation along the way in what you're talking about. So now we jump into kind of the renewable energy standards, and we wanted to first test awareness of what folks know. And so we saw from an overall awareness perspective that RPU set a goal in 2019 to deliver 100% net renewable electricity by the year 2030. We saw that 34.7%, or that blue part of the pie chart, represented awareness. 58.1% represented lack or no awareness, and then we saw another 7% don't know. I'd be more concerned, so that there's a distinction here of, I understand what you're talking about, I have not heard about it, I don't understand what you're talking about. So then we start to drill into, as well, a very similar standard when asking about the overall awareness of the established Minnesota carbon-free standard, or 100% net renewable by 2040, we saw 34%. So it's about the same. If you're aware of one, you're roughly aware of both, but still over 55% in both categories are not aware of these of these needs or these standards. So from there, you start to really break down where is the preference. And so again, when we look at total support for RPU's current net renewable goal, that's where we see the 70.6%. And we broke this down in kind of what we call a top two box, so you start to understand the strength of the support. And when you break down that 70.6%, 45.7% strongly support the 2030 goal, 24.9% somewhat support that 2030 goal. And then if you're looking at a breakdown of residential versus commercial, just in the strongly support, 46% are residential, and then 28% on commercial side strongly support. So that's how we break down that 70.6. We'll then jump on to this next slide that says, okay, now we start to introduce a smaller annual increase. At the time of the survey, we talked about a 4% increase over time if you're going towards the 2040 slower rollout, or roughly 6% annual increases. Knowing full well that these numbers can change, it still basically boils down to a slower rollout over more time, or a more aggressive rollout over a short period of time, and then there's a cost associated with that. Collectively speaking, when you really look at even the demographics and breaking down, most folks really preferred at that 59.4%, or the light blue piece of the pie there, preferred a slower rollout with a smaller increase over time. So again, plugging in the numbers, but you still saw 2/5 said stay the course, stay aggressive, even with higher increases. We support the 2030. What we did see was the younger audiences, which is your 18 to 34, as well as those making 50,000 or less, continue to support that more aggressive goal. But the majority of folks in all other demographic categories stressed lower increases, slower time. On this next slide, I won't read it to you, but we really wanted to show you the actual language that we used. And again, we had folks calling into our offices, making sure that they had the opportunity to do the survey. And if they needed help understanding, we would read these things off to them. But it really broke down the language that we utilized on the current goal versus the alternative goal. And again, this information is made available for you all. But if you have any more detailed questions, we're happy to answer that for you. Interest in RPU's carbon offset program, or the REX program, we saw about 31.2% reported total interest, 7.1 on the very, 24.1 on the somewhat interested. When we got into any changes in that interest level, if there was a charge to do so, we saw 15.4% would be more likely to participate, 54.4% it would not change their interest, 15.4% less likely to participate, and 15% were unsure. And that's change in interest if the net renewable goal was delayed. I apologize, the next slide was where the cost is. But if it was delayed, most folks still had the same level of interest. Looking at general perceptions and understanding, so now we get into a little bit of perception of the reasonableness of RPU's current rates among customers. We saw 53.4% said that your current rates are reasonable. 40.5% said your rates were unreasonable. When we broke out the overall understanding of how RPU sets its electric rates for customers, only 32.5% understood well how you do that. So again, this is pretty clear from a research perspective. We really need to communicate how well we compare against other utilities. If we're higher, that's okay. You identify all the things that you're doing and the benefits that come with RPU. If you're lower, for obvious reasons, we want to communicate that as well for folks. A couple more slides here, and then we'll open it up to questions. There is a pretty strong trust, or level of trust, that they have in you to act in their best interest. So when we ask that question, how would you describe the level of trust you have in RPU to operate in your best interest? We saw 66.5% said total trust, only 8.5% said don't know. And then how do you compare to other Minnesota utilities? 27% believe you're higher, 19% believe you're about the same, 4% said you're lower, and 50% said don't know. So that's where some of that education piece comes into play. So from last but not least, again, I think most of these we've already addressed. And again, I've gone through this quickly, but I'm always available to answer more detailed questions for you. I simply wanted to be mindful of your schedule this evening. But customer satisfaction is solid at that 70%, driven by strong staff performance. And as you think about that education piece, it is very clear as they have an interaction with a member of this utility, the experience that they have with you goes up and gets better. So that's great. That's not always the case. Rates and reliability dominate the priorities. So again, communications and planning should directly link decisions to affordability and dependable service. I'll jump down to that last recommendation where rate understanding lags. So greater transparency and education on rate setting could also strengthen that trust and credibility. We're not always going to be able to lower rates. Folks understand that, but when they understand they're part of the process and they understand what drives that, and it also gives you the opportunity to focus on some of the conservation programs and rate assistance programs that you may have. So if your rates are higher, here are some things that you can do to help offset that or increasing. So that education works both ways. Support for renewables is strong but cost sensitive. So again, customers do lean towards that 2040 time frame. When trade-offs are clear, balancing ambition with affordability is critical. And then last but not least is as long as we're really not paying for it, we're interested in the carbon offset program. So I'll just pop it up on screen while I start to answer questions, but this really kind of breaks down the residential profile or the demographics. We had a really good mix of age, home ownership versus renters, race and ethnicity, education levels, income levels, and we always want to get a good mix so we can run those analyses by those. And again, there were some targets that we wanted to have from a weighting perspective. And then last but not least on the commercial side, how long they've been a customer, the number of employees that they have, and then the industry that they serve. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all have, but once again, just wanted to thank you for your continued business, and we are here to assist as needed.
Any questions?
No questions, just an observation as you're going through that and seeing how we need to do a little bit of rates education. I am curious as people were weighing their options between, like a this % rate increase with this timeline for our renewables goal versus a slightly more rate increase with the later, or slightly less increase with a later timeline. If they were thinking about their entire RPU bill, electric and water, plus what we add on there as a stormwater for the city, which is not RPU, but we put it on the bill and help collect it for the city.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if people were thinking about the entire bill or just the portion of their electric utility, and I suppose that might not be information that we have available, but perhaps it's some work that we can do as we're educating people on what may increase as we look at our plan.
Fantastic question. I can provide a little bit of context to that. So we didn't break that down specifically in that perspective. So generally speaking, I would say yes, folks will look at and think about the whole bill, right? So education is key there. However, what we've also found is that when you break it out, okay, so if you break it out in a multi-bill situation and still break it down, whether it is for infrastructure improvements or hitting net renewable goals, there is still a preference for folks to take smaller increases over time than bigger increases in a shorter period of time. So from that standpoint, generally speaking, regardless how you break down the bill, whether it's total bill or just the electric portion, from a rates perspective, that is generally something that wins out.
And you usually see this in all sorts of different surveys that you do.
Correct.
Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
So seeing what we've seen with the price tag of our plan increasing quite a bit in the past few years, and I have very little confidence things are going to be cheaper or less stable in 2040 than they are now. I'm thinking that the overall, when you add up the absolute dollars impact of what this is going to cost us, the sooner we build and acquire what we need, the lower the overall absolute cost is. What do you see with consumer behavior on when they look at that long run absolute dollar sort of thing? Do they still want the lower rate increases in the future? Or are they willing to trade that off for over the next decade or two, you'll pay less money?
If you can show those numbers,
Which is
hard,
yes.
you know, the general public, and we do a lot of these rate studies, I've been doing these for 25 years, the general public doesn't think long-term, right? They're thinking about the impact on my bill right now and what that means, particularly as you get into dealing with folks with fixed incomes, and they're not worried about 10 years down the road. They're worried about today. And knowing that prices don't go down, generally speaking, with our general expenses related to our homes and where we live, if I can spread that out over time, things are going to go up anyway. So unless there's a real calculation that says, if we do it sooner and spend this money up front, there is a greater impact on lower bills down the road. And if that's the fact, if that's the case, then you have to communicate that and really, you go on the road and you do road shows. That's where I've seen folks have town hall meetings and really explain at deep level the true trade-offs of more money now, savings later, or we're trying to manage savings along the way. It's really a preferred path, and it's what you have on the back end waiting for you. But generally speaking, the public says, I'd like to go as slow as possible on rates.
Okay.
From an increase perspective.
Other questions? Well, thank you.
Great, thank you very
Very
much.
good.
I wish you all a great evening.
All right, next, Tim's up to talk about renewable energy goals and our rates.
Well, a lot of work has gone into today. Just want to thank the team that was behind a lot of these efforts. We've done a significant amount of engagement with the community, back-end work on financial modeling. There's been a lot of long hours, and I'm excited we're actually here at a moment of decision. So what I would like to do is just do a brief overview of how we arrived at what is in front of you today with the resolution that's associated with this decision item for you. I'd like to back up a little bit and just do an overview of our power supply resource plan. I shared this with the City Council yesterday evening, but if you were to ask me how much progress have we made towards 2030, I can summarize it here. The left side of the reliable capacity, if you average all those together, we're about 2/3 done with securing our capacity needs by 2030. So we've made decent progress. We have today about 1/3 of our own capacity with existing generation. So we've secured another 1/3 of that capacity going into 2030 with the investments that we intend to make in wind and the investments we intend to make in Mount Simon Station. What remains is the blue hashed areas. More summer capacity is needed. That's the primary challenge that we're faced with right now. Those decisions need to be made in the next 4.5 years to secure that capacity going on beyond 2030. On the renewable energy side of our goal, with the recent decisions that the board has made on authorizing the 3 wind contracts, we have since taken one of those to City Council that has been authorized, the Adams County Wind. We have 2 more that we believe will go to Council next Monday, and so we believe that by next week we'll have authorized to engage in 245 megawatts of wind. You look at the net impact on an annual basis, that will reach about 70% of our renewable electricity needs on an ongoing basis. So you can say we're about 2/3 done or better on securing our renewable energy needs. That is a compliance pathway for the Minnesota Carbon-Free Standard. And in the short term, because we're bringing them on early, it actually puts us in a position to meet our 100% by 2030 goal and sustain it for a few years. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. This is the data behind how much of our capacity we've secured. what our planning reserve margin is each of the summers, each of the seasons in 2030. That's the top line. And then how much we have with existing or planned builds right now that we've already made decisions on, and what remains then, the percent complete in each of those seasons. In aggregate, 2/3. So we still have a little bit of work to do there on our reliable capacity. Regarding the renewable electricity, if we are able to stay on course with bringing the wind projects online in the 27, 28 timeframe, which we expect, we'll be able to bank a few renewable energy credits, and then with ongoing production of about 70% a year, plus what we've banked with the early investments, we're in a position, if all that holds, to meet the goal 2031, 2032, 2033. This gives us about 9 years to continue to look at the market to see what opportunities would be there. We do know in the very, very short term, the impact of tariffs are having an acute pressure on some of these projects. So while I generally agree with your question earlier, Melissa, about the long-term costs will likely be higher, I think there's some short-term effects right now that we're facing with federal policy regulation that we're trying to see what the other side is. So there are cases in past investments where things have gotten cheaper in the future. And so I don't think that's just an across-the-board rule that we can plan on. It's generally true. What I do know is we have about 10 years that we can seek to make these decisions. We'll continue to bring projects forward that meet our goals and fit within our rate strategy as well, but it does give us a little bit of time. So this is a slightly updated version. This one represents our current renewable energy standard, which is 25%. That's the state level renewable energy standard. We meet that today through our relationship with SIMPA. They have 200 megawatts of wind in their portfolio, and that meets about 25% of the members' needs right now. So we can with confidence say we're at 25% in this year. And then above that line, that's the representation of what bringing renewables online early would be. If we bank those RECs, our balance grows, and it puts us in a position that in 2030 and beyond, you can see what we pull back out of the bank and we hit our goal. So I would, in full transparency, when coming into this question of slow the goal down or speed it up with the cost pressures, I myself was not recognizing the opportunity that we had with these early decisions to actually meet our goal and sustain it with some banked REC. So I think many of us on the RPU team don't like setting a goal and not hitting it. And so the idea of going into 2030 with 70% of our renewable energy volume secured was a little bit challenging. But once we were able to see that we have a strategy here that can help us meet and sustain the goal with the decisions we've already made and give us time to assess the rest of the market to secure the remaining 30%, it puts us in a really strong position. And so I wanted to highlight that here for all of you as well, that we do have confidence that with these projects moving forward, we can achieve the goal with the decisions that this board has already made and the council will be considering very soon. Any questions here? This one was a powerful graphic for me after seeing how the banked REC strategy can sustain our goal in the short term and give us time. By 2033, you can see we need to be in a position to add more renewables to sustain our 100% goal. But very quickly after that, the Minnesota carbon-free standard steps up, and we're in a position where that's going to be the pathway that we would be on anyway. So with what we're doing here, it's about 80% of the volume of renewable electricity that we need in that 10-year period already decided on. So it's really about that last 20% at this point.
Okay, so the questions when we took them to our customers, they were a little bit of a black and white either or, when we have much more of a gray area situation going on here.
Might have been why I selected gray as the banked REC color in the series, but yes.
Okay.
It is. We intentionally chose the survey questions as a forced binary, choose path A or path B. The intent behind that was to pit our customers' values against one another, because we are in a situation where continued early progress on renewable electricity comes at some cost, and so we We value affordable rates, we value affordability, we value a reliability and our renewable energy, and there's some trade-offs here. So we were trying to get a good sense of what our customers' desires are. And so what I took from that survey, what Great Blue Research shared earlier, is our customers largely have strong support of a renewable electricity goal. You saw that in the 70% support before you started asking questions about money. But then when money and pacing enters in, there's a slight preference for a delayed schedule. We are on a schedule right now that, if we make no further decisions, would be a delayed schedule. So we're moving that way. What the big difference between the 4 and the 6% scenarios was adding additional renewables pre-2030 to get us into a 100% position in 2030 and beyond. And you can see right now we're going into 2030 with a 70% position with a bank of RECs to sustain in the short term. That's really the key difference between those two scenarios. In aggregate, if you do the two trajectories there over that period, it equates, I think, to about $30 million of cost that would, additional $30 million of cost that would be incurred to do even more earlier. By staying on this pathway and assessing and adding it at the right time, we still could add it earlier if the market's right and the decisions are right there. Not saying we won't do that, but that was really the key difference between those two. This really outlines the modeling behind that. So another...
Yeah, I'm sorry, if I could.
Please, yeah.
Just, if you step back, you had the chart about the dispatchable and the other, and I just want to make a comment and see if you'd fix me here. I'm trying to get my head around the reliable capacity has the battery storage on that side. Mm-hmm. I view it as much more important on the other side, but I think I understand why it belongs over here. But at the same time, to me, this is a key investment to get us towards that, our renewable energy, because in my understanding of the wind, solar, the other renewables is they can produce and overproduce, and the battery is critical for when they're not producing. I mean, I'm looking at it as a skewed chart because I still think some of our most important investments between now and 2030 is going to be in battery technology, which there's good chances it's going to, that's one area where improvements are coming. But when I see it this way, it doesn't look like it helps us. Can you comment or help me understand it better?
Sure, I can. So in framing a renewable energy goal, the way you measure that is through renewable energy certificates or environmental attributes. And battery storage as a technology doesn't generate any of those. And so from a compliance with the renewable energy goal, it really doesn't have any impact there on meeting our goal. But batteries are one of the leading forms of cost-effective capacity, and it adds significant value to an energy market by doing exactly what you say. The ability to capture excess energy that can come at times where there's a surplus, generally at low cost. You can charge a battery system and store that for a period of time, discharge it later. And so it can help renewable energy meet capacity needs, but really it comes by increasing the capacity value of those renewable projects, not giving you more renewable certificates. In some ways, batteries can actually be a hindrance to renewable compliance because many times of the year they will be charged with grid energy, which might come from other forms. And every time you put 100 units of energy into a battery, you get less than 100 out of it. So you end up putting more in, and you can have some losses there that can kind of concentrate emissions. So batteries as a technology aren't all good or all bad. They provide specific values of capacity. We put them on the capacity side of our plan because it meets our capacity needs primarily, and it really doesn't add anything more to the renewable certificates or the environmental attributes that help us achieve our 100% goal and how we measure it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go with that, but I think the key thing you said was it's on the capacity side. But again, my assumption is they're going to be charged through the renewable energy sources, not the other way around.
So I would agree with you in many cases, but for a battery to operate in the market and maintain accreditation, meaning it serves to meet the market capacity needs, it has to be charged when the time is right. And that means it's going to be charged with market energy that may not directly be coupled to a renewable project. And so it really is sitting there taking energy off the whole market. It might be sitting right next to a renewable project, but if the wind's not blowing, that battery still may be charging off the grid because it needs to be there to meet the next capacity piece later on. So they may be physically located together, they might be built together, but batteries as a technology to maintain accreditation, they have to be able to charge and discharge to meet the market needs, and that's not always aligned with when renewable energy is being produced.
Thank you.
It's a little bit counterintuitive. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to keep stepping through. Wanted to highlight here the two scenarios that were the basis of our survey, the 4% and the 6%, and also the basis of the budget proposals that you've seen. Scenario 4 was the 100% by 2030 case. It contemplated 200 megawatts of wind and 100 megawatts of solar being added. From that time in June when we put this plan together, we've since not recommended solar and we've increased the wind portfolio. That's part of the shift of why we're in a different budget and rate recommendation from the 4% earlier, is things have changed a little bit. The tariff pressures of solar have pushed them outside of the range of what we think is prudent at the moment. And we have some newer, bigger opportunities on wind that we can secure earlier at much lower cost, more than half the cost of the solar energy. And so we've shifted the portfolio recommendation heavier on wind, and it comes online in a little bit earlier time frame. So the major difference is the later additions, really that 2030 addition, the 100 megawatts, that in our current scenario could be delayed up until 2033 to wait for the right market. We can maintain it in that position as well. So that's really the big difference between the two, is that project was needing to come online by like 28 or 29 in the same high cost period. When it boils down to the impact on rates, and here's the key part of my recommendation as well, we run scenarios at both a 4% trajectory and a 6% trajectory. And really the question right now is more of a 6 or 8% trajectory because of some of the other cost pressures that have happened. The bars across the bottom are as if we never touch rates and we just sell what we are projecting to sell, we have a pretty flat revenue projection. This is a good story to tell because our customers are using less electricity on average per customer. And so we're not increasing sales, we're not projecting huge load growth here, but we are projecting cost increases. So the way that we can handle that is by adjusting rates to generate more revenue. So we've looked at the 4% trajectory. That is the yellow dotted line up above. That's the revenue it would generate over that period. Then the 6% trajectory line, that's the revenue that it would project. Where we believe our actual costs will land based off of decisions that we've already made are the two lines above that. We typically plan for some amount of power cost adjustment to flow through the bill. That's the variable component of our annual energy that the market average cost from the MISO market can go up or down. Now that we've added renewables in this early market, we have a little bit of additional risk exposure there, so you can see the spread between those two. Our costs could actually be that top magenta line in this 28, 29 period where we've got additional renewable electricity, all of our SIMPA costs there as well. And if we pick the 4% trajectory, the power cost adjustment could range anywhere from 1.7 to 3.3 cents on top of what we call the headline rate. And that's a position that I think I would want to avoid. We typically try and cap our PCA at about 2 cents on top. So going into this period planning for a high range of power cost adjustment, I believe it's a more transparent rate to say, we do think the range of costs could be here. Let's put more of that in our base rates and have less variable power cost adjustment on top of it. So we are on the slower pathway here with only adding 70% of the renewable volume and adding it a little bit early, but it's coming at slightly higher cost, which is the basis of the recommendation to sustain the goal and also choose, at least in the next 2 years, the 6% trajectory to try and smooth that rate trajectory and avoid a spike of rates in 28 and avoid the higher range of power cost adjustment, which will be paid for by our customers. I've heard it suggested, I've heard it talked about, how can we reduce other costs as well? I did want to talk briefly, I inserted this slide today. I was talking with our team sitting before you here of what is RPU doing to try and manage costs along the way? If you remember back from January, we kicked off this Continue Improving campaign to try and find cost efficiencies, quality improvements, enhance the value of our services. And I just did a quick poll of our team, and we've this year alone shaved, I think, $1 million of expense out of our annual budgets, just in doing some very easy decisions to focus our advertising dollars, go to higher touch channels. We were able to cut $120,000 out of our marketing budgets. We retired an old load management system that wasn't having any load impact, and the rebate savings there is about $140,000 of expense that wasn't really providing any benefit. We've assessed some of our equipment and realized we had some surplus equipment, and we sold off some equipment that was sitting idle and generated some short-term value out of something that just would have sat there. And with the card payment fees that we're contemplating here of charging those versus absorbing them, all those decisions alone have impacted reducing future rate pressures by about $1 million in the first year and sustaining that by $900,000. That was just really quick examples that we could put together. This is the work that our team does every day. And so I would like to highlight the work of the team. There was a lot of this work that went into building the budget to try and hold costs back. We know that there are cost pressures coming, and that is the work that this team does every day as well. So I wanted to highlight the good work that's happening there as well. To summarize, you have a resolution that was drafted in front of you. This was a collaborative work between myself, your board president, Malachi, and your board vice president, Wendy, acting as kind of an informal ad hoc group to, based off of the customer research, based off of the stakeholder engagement, based off of the decisions that we've already made, we believe that we can sustain the 100% by 2030 goal. There's still more work to be done there. And so the resolution in front of you is for the board to reaffirm that goal, to keep it as our resource planning target. There's some additional, what I'll call caveats in there that are aligned even with state statute on the state renewable energy standard, that if there's technological barriers or if there's issues outside of our control, in the public interest, we may have to make decisions to further delay that goal or assess when those decisions would be made. So we tried to build that language, which I believe is the will of this board, to make a balanced decision of rates, reliability, and responsibility. I did want to touch on these early wind acquisition strategy and just for clarity say that we're going into 2030 right now with 70% secured and some early investments that we can sustain it in the short term, but there's more work to be done. If we can avoid making those additional costs happen in the next 5-year period, we can avoid the duplication of costs that happen while we're still paying our SIMPA bill as well. So that's another reason for the delay, to avoid this higher cost duplication period. Provide direction to staff to continue advancing the goal. I think we would do this anyway. And it is my recommendation in the next item to sustain the 6% rate trajectory in the budget. But for now, I'll pause there, see if there's any questions, and allow the board to consider the resolution in front of them. I did have a chance to talk with Malachi today as well. He regrets that he can't make the meeting. He had a work conflict and a delayed flight. He's on a plane right now. He had hoped to be back at noon today and be here for the meeting, but it just didn't work out for him. He did want to send along a message, and straight from Malachi, he said he wanted to thank and recognize the diligent and thoughtful work of Vice President Turi and GM McCullough performed discussing and shaping this balanced resolution in the ad hoc group. I fully support the resolution and the leadership of RPU as they guide our utility towards 2030. This resolution gives RPU the flexibility to make future decisions in the best interest of ratepayers. The proposed rates are honest, transparent, and reflect the reality of the current cost environment. So Malachi's not weighing in on the actual decision, but he just wanted to send that note ahead as well of his support in helping draft the resolution. So I will pause now.
Patrick?
Yeah, I'll just start out like the resolution as presented that I was looking at on page 57. I really do like that first paragraph talks about that idea of system reliability, sustainable rate structure, and then responsibility. And this all does go back to those R's. And I think even from the beginning of these discussions, it was like, what can we do to be responsible citizens within what sort of cost structure? And I think we're still battling within those things. And when I look at the specifics then in the resolution, talking about reaffirming the commitment, pursuing the goals, direction to the board, I want to fully support this tonight. Okay, but I will say, but on the next one, I still do have, and I think you're responding to it here, this idea that like, what more can we be doing to address the rate pressures? And I think, and I made a case at the council last night to try to say, what more can we do to work this back down to the 4%? And I want to make a statement here that I'm not asking for us to change the plan. I'm asking for us to try to fit that plan into a 4% rate. And it's different than resetting the plan. I'll say this too. I don't think I have the support to do this. I think you give a good recommendation here tonight saying these are how we came up with these costs. And I think that's where we're at in September. And I think I can support this resolution and the next vote to talk about, let's say to our residents that 6% is what we think we're at. But when we come to November and December and setting them, I still think we have the hard discussions to have.
I think that's fair.
Other questions? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I would like to move to approve the resolution as presented to us on page 57 and 58 of our plan.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion? I guess the only thing I would like to say is I've been part of these discussions and where we started and where we're at today, and just want to thank the team for getting us here, because it's been tough, because we're talking about two real different issues that I feel strongly about, and so I feel like they've done a really good job, and I support it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you came up with a very balanced approach to it. At first, I thought, okay, so we're kind of slowing down, but we're still going with the 6%. But you really explained that well, Tim. And I agree with you on the power cost adjustment and being able to smooth that out. I think we heard that from the earlier presentation that I know it's a higher than 4%, but it will delay some of those higher cost spikes, if you will, to our customers. So I think it's a really good approach, and well done.
Patrick?
I just had one other comment. Just the perspective of, I was in this room, what is it, 7 years ago when we did the votes, and I wasn't a part of this board, but you have to realize when it's 2019 and you're making commitments for 2030, you don't know the landscape. No. I mean, this idea of we started creating a survey in July that by the time we put it out, our assumptions were wrong. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of environment we're in, and that shouldn't surprise anyone. That's the world we live in, and those things are going to happen. So, I don't see those as like flaws or faults, but I think it's just we just have to work through them as we go.
And I appreciate how you've been doing your best with the information that we do have available and staying nimble, and I think this is a good path forward.
I appreciate that feedback. The team's done incredible work over the last year. Going into December, we turned a plan into action, and we had to take what was on paper, here's what the costs are, get real bids, real projects, look at real costs, and make some decisions. And that's when I think the rubber meets the road on these, when you go from a plan to executing. And I just want to commend the team sitting here and the ones that sit behind them as well. We're in a position today to have been able to execute on some early win because of the proactive planning, and we wouldn't have been in this position if we would have been sitting back and waiting as well. And we were able to make some of these adjustments in the course of this budget as well. So
thank you.
All the recognition should go that direction, not here.
Great. All right. Any more discussion? Otherwise, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. All right, next, Tim and Peter are going to be talking about the water and electric rates.
Maybe for the sake of time, we didn't prepare a particular presentation for this one. Peter, come on up. But just wanted to introduce that the basis of this recommendation for noticing our customers about the intended rate trajectory is a board-adopted policy. We do have a board policy to send notice ahead of a decision on rates. That's what the decision in front of the board is tonight. We're not setting rates. You're not setting rates here. You're making a decision to send notice out to customers to inform them and publish the intention that would be decided on in the October meeting. And so that actual decision comes in October and then is perfected in December with the council concurrence of the rates and the budget. So just to frame that here, I think I've spoken to the basis of the 6% recommendation, and for sake of time, might just open it up for questions to see if there's any additional discussion needed on the topic. Did you have anything you wanted to add as well to that?
No, I think you framed up really well, and actually you took like easily a minute.
Yeah.
You don't have to do a lot on recommendations. You made the recommendation.
Did we also have the water rate numbers?
So yes, this would be, so the recommendation is to adopt the notification for a 9% general rate increase for water for 26 and 27, and a 6% general rate increase for electric for 26 and 27, and the associated fees and other charges that we talked about leading up to this decision as well. It's published in your for board action item that shows the 6% recommendation. There is the alternative 4 in front of you as well. We prepared that as we said we would. And then there's also a section of text that shows what we would publish in the newspaper as part of our noticing customers as well.
Patrick?
Just a operational thing here. I see that the request, I see the exhibits. Did I see a draft resolution, or is it really what I would make the motion on would be to approve the public notification of the proposed rate changes for both water and electric utilities?
Yes, there's 2 draft resolutions.
Yeah, and I'm scanning through and not finding them. But I think the packet has prepared us enough if we have any questions, but I'd like to get a resolution on the floor first for water.
Okay. A motion? Then,
Like to
we're
get a-
going to do them together or separately?
I think you have the flexibility to do either, as long as we have clear direction at the end of the resolutions. Doesn't matter to us.
Okay. Patrick?
I apologize, but I'm scanning for record rate. I see the right notifications. Yeah, I don't, I'm sorry, this is why I was trying to.
So there are 2 resolutions attached. They're in the middle. There's a resolution that would be on page, sorry, I could read it off, but it's buried in the middle of the,
Yeah, that's where I'm having trouble.
Yep. Sorry.
It is.
Let me get you to a page number.
That
just so
page
we
number
can-
would be great, because I'm scanning and couldn't, I don't have good search on this or anything.
Okay, so let's, it's.
It doesn't have a page number.
I could reference it by attachment.
I actually think, Chair Turi, I think with the language that we have that says the board approves it is good enough, and don't have to have the exact resolution in our board meeting minutes.
Here would be the proposed resolution, Board Member Keene. Be it resolved by the Public Utility Board of the City of Rochester to approve public notification of the proposed 26-27 rate changes for the water utility based on a 9% general rate adjustment. That would be the resolution for the water.
Yeah, I just got there. Thank you. I'll move approval of that motion.
Okay, second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
Again, this is, I want to just state again, we're doing notification. I consider this analogous to what we do with the levy of setting this as the max thing, and once we tell them that, but we still do have the authority to make changes to it before it goes out, before it's voted on.
Okay. Anything else? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
And I'll move resolution, be it resolved, Public Utility Board to approve public notification of the proposed 26-27 rate changes for the electric utility based on the 6% general rate adjustment.
Second?
A second.
Discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Very good. Thank you very much. That's been a lot of work leading up to this. I appreciate the board's support of the recommendation moving forward. You ready to step to the next item?
Yes, looks like that's Bill to talk about the natural gas agreement, supply agreement.
Good evening. In your packet, I think you have a resolution to approve a gas transportation contract. Now, what we're trying to do here is line up a secondary firm contract. And to let you know the difference, firm gas is guaranteed delivery, so you have a guaranteed supply when you need it. This is particularly important in the winter. We do have a firm gas supply at Silver Lake because that plant runs consistently, and it's worth it for us to have that supply for the customer. The pricing is typically the highest because you're guaranteeing it. I guess I would equate this to kind of first class if you're flying. So it's always there, you're first in line to get it, and you've reserved that capacity on the pipeline. And it only becomes an issue when heating use is high, and the pipeline fills up and there's no more capacity. Secondary firm gas is what we're asking for approval to enter into for a kind of a 10-year price, is preemptible. So that means that it can be, you're first in line if one of the firm gas customers does not take their supply, then they go down the list and they can make some of that capacity available to you. So it's not guaranteed, but you're not required to take anything. You can bypass it because usually when it's made available, there are a lot of people that would be willing to take it. And typically this is used by power generators or businesses that can shift their use to other times. And then the third category is interruptible, and that is kind of you're at the bottom of the ladder. You're in economy at the back of the plane, and you are, if there are any problems, they're going to shut you off. And that does happen to us from time to time. Particularly Winter Storm Heather was an example of this. That was earlier this year. It was what they call an SOL, which is not the SOL that you might be thinking. It is the system overrun limitation, but kind of same idea. So when there's limited natural gas supply, we will immediately move our Cascade Creek gas turbines to liquid fuel. And then West Side is, we bid it based on whatever gas they've made available. Now, when they declare an SOL, it doesn't mean we're completely SOL. It means that there might be some gas available, but our operating hours are limited. But if things are really bad, then they will make nothing available to us. And there's another concept in there, MISO, conservative operations. MISO, kind of right before they go into emergency operations, they go into conservative operations. So that's a warning to everybody. If you've got anything that can run, get it ready to run because we may need you. And that's when, they really are needing the capacity to be available. And that's usually when LMP prices are going pretty high. So what happened on the week of January 12th through the 17th, it was very cold. And a funny thing happened. I think the cold moved down from Canada as it aims to do. So the cold wave spread down into MISO. And so it had more and more impacts. Even though it was getting warmer here, it was getting colder in other parts of the MISO footprint. So gas demand was going up all across MISO. And that's when, the Northern Natural Gas System did call an SOL at the beginning, on the Friday before that weekend. And then, it took a day or two for MISO to catch up and say, we better declare conservative operations. And then Northern Natural Gas did call critical days, and critical days are when there is no non-firm natural gas. So every one that has firm natural gas is taking up the capacity in the pipeline. So in this case, West Side is forced into an outage because there's no backup fuel there. We cannot run at all, so we have to tell MISO we have to have, it's basically like having a forced outage because we can't run the plant. And just so you know, this year had a lot of SOL, so it was, January had 142 hours, February had 206 hours, April had 72 hours. The January and February ones were due to weather. The April one was due to a problem on the pipeline upstream. This chart shows kind of, now we're showing you wind production because I think as we move into more wind in our portfolio, this becomes somewhat important. You can see this is from January 1st through January 21st. And it is basically the output of wind in MISO. And you can see it does go down quite a bit in the winter. And you can see where the gas SOL hit was right around the time that wind started to decrease. And you can see that the MISO conservative operation hit when we hit a valley in wind generation, which probably means that, MISO sees the margins shrinking, so what's available capacity. They saw it wasn't going to be as windy, so their forecast for wind generation went down, and then they're saying, all right, we need to be ready. This could turn into an emergency situation. And then, on the final kind of day toward January 17th, there was a total curtailment for those 2 days, January 16th and 17th. So in this case, we were not able to run on January 16th or 17th. If we were able to run, we would have made an additional $15,000 in the capacity we lost during that time was about $15,000, and the additional margin we got was about $3,000. And we would have been able to achieve that with only $1,200 in additional costs, because we're basically paying a small premium over the base price of natural gas. Now, we're not guaranteed to get that, but this improves the probability that we'd be able to run through that. So ideally, this would increase our capacity accreditation for West Side, and we think it's worth the economics. We don't know exactly what the probability is going to be that there will be anything available, but we would have a lot, I believe we would have had a lot fewer than the 142, 206, and 72 SOL events in 2024. So with that, you've got the contract in your packet. We will, the resolution is for you to recommend that the city council allow us to enter into the agreement.
I move approval of the resolution on board packet page 263.
I believe that's the.
Did you make a motion?
She did,
Okay,
yes.
good. I just wasn't sure if you were
did.
asking the question.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion?
Yeah, I think we're here because the contract is big enough that you needs more than the RPU.
Because it's multiple years.
It's not because of the size,
It's
it's
the
because
multiple
it's a
years.
multi-year, and the charter provisions reserve that multi-year, up to 40-year contract to the city council only. So the board's role in this is to make a recommendation and a report of, which we would bring this forward to the city council. It's only the city council that can contract over a longer period of time. The board's authority is limited to what's approved in the budget.
Okay, all right. That's helpful. And when the fiscal impact, you said this should be offset with the 10% or the margins we'll get off the trades.
Yeah, if we don't have to pay it if we don't get capacity released to us. So there's no cost if we don't get it, but if we do get it, then there is a net positive benefit.
Yeah, see, that's where I was struggling with this. And I think I picture this almost much more of an operational management decision. I'm fine with you guys doing this, but I never saw what the cost is of what I'm approving.
Oh, it's in the contract. I believe the contract
dug
is
the
in
same thing. I can
It's
read through
an
it.
additional 85 cents per.
So it's I thought they were going to charge us for the right to be able to buy it at those prices.
No, they just add that cost into.
Okay,
under
on to
we
when you make the
buy.
purchase. So there is no upfront cost, but it's a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
It impacts the 10-year cost of spot gas. So we would pay the spot gas price plus this 52
Yep.
cent or 85 cent adder
onto
for every
it. All
unit
right.
of gas that we
Yeah.
take. So the net impact here is it's going to slightly raise the production cost of Westside Energy Station, which means it might get called into the market a few less hours.
Yep.
It would actually reduce our overall run hours.
Yeah.
I can't quantify by how much, but slightly, because the unit only runs when it's economic to run.
Right.
And it'll also reserve some capacity for us because it'll be running at times when we need it, and that will preserve our capacity accreditation.
And on the other side of that equation is we have a better chance of getting the fuel.
Yeah.
Because of the secondary, because we have the
Yep.
secondary contract.
Of not having to have a
Yep.
forced outage.
Yep.
because of it.
Thank you.
When it's running, it can prevent the $200 cost.
Yep.
And we don't have fuel oil to run it, so it also helps hedge energy costs as well.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions for discussion? I just had one, just more curious than anything. Do we anticipate SOLs just continuing to happen?
Yeah, I mean, it really is weather dependent, but yes, I mean, it was uncanny how many we had last year. I mean, 30% of the hours in February were SOLs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
There's a number of drivers there, if I could speak to that. I think there are many utilities out there adding additional uses of natural gas. So the demands for future natural gas are higher than the current ones, even though there's fuel switching happening and electrification of building heat, which reduces natural gas consumption. Largely, we're seeing increased future demands for it, as well as increased exporting of natural gas through LNG. So there's higher demands happening that we believe the future has more of these SOL type events. It's one of the reasons for the recommendation here to get secondary firm in place to preserve some capacity.
Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, board policy review.
No additional policy recommendations for this month, so there's no change to what was in front of you. We do intend to gather an ad hoc group, I think in 2 weeks, to have an initial discussion about the rates policy, which would be the next. So nothing new here on this item tonight, unless there is any other board recommendations for next policies to take up.
General manager report.
Take this from my seat. For sake of time, I'll do an abbreviated version again tonight. I would encourage you to read some of the monthly highlights. There's a lot of very good things happening around RPU, recognition of teammates winning awards, completion of some major projects. I do want to highlight item 2 here. I sent an email to the board about the United States Postal Service truck fire. Because of quick actions by the team to recognize this issue before it became worse, we were able to block late fees, communicate with customers strategically. So we haven't seen any strong adverse effects yet. We're going to see probably $400,000 of additional accounts receivable from unpaid bills where bills never went out. And also like to highlight that we're going to be in future years doing an additional push for e-bill receipt. Customers who get an electronic version of the bill would not have been impacted there. So yet another reason that I advise not sending things in the U.S. mail, especially if you want them to get there. That's just my own position there. Another big item, you might have seen this announcement come through the news. This map represents the DMC approved funding. I think there's still one final step as the ERA gathers to finalize that recommendation. But there has been a DMC commitment of about $40 million this year and $40 million next year that supports key investments in those highlighted areas. And I would invite you to look at the orange and the green. Those represent the DMC area boundaries where this funding will support citywide coordinated projects. So all the green corridors will be road improvements, street improvements, surface level improvements. One significant item here, and I'd like to recognize our public works peers, Cindy Steinhauser, Tyler Niemeyer, Ryan Yetzer, many others that put together a package here that included bundled funding for the water utilities, all water utilities as well. That's a really big deal for us as well. So a significant issue, and we owe a gratitude of thanks for our teammates on helping prepare this package with support from DMC as well. That puts us in a very strong position to do these coordinated projects well. A couple items we do need to touch on SIMPA. There was a approval for a bond issuance. This is a refunding of existing debt. It has a positive net present value, but there is some new debt being issued for SIMPA to refund some previous bonds. There's no new debt being accomplished here, but that is happening as we speak. I think in the next couple weeks that the deal will be done. So that was approved through the normal process there. We are in a strong position as the agency. We're actually above maximum bandwidth for operating reserves. I do anticipate the SIMPA board will consider a decision item at the October meeting, at the annual meeting, to refund some of the operating reserves above max to the members. I think there's support for that. That's a good item where we can mitigate future costs, to your earlier point, where some of this additional rate impact will be coming back to us through the wholesale rates, which would mitigate some of the power cost adjustment costs there. Speaking of ECA, this is a representation of the monthly cost that does get passed through on our bill to our customers. And I just want to highlight that this will still be in place in the 27, 28, 29 timeframe, and we'll have some additional components of the power cost adjustment that will include our wind energy in our portfolio. So the range of PCA risks, we also have to consider what will also be coming through SIMPA's ECA pass-through as well. So that will still be present at the same time. We attended the budget and rate workshop, and I do have a good news item. SIMPA has announced an even higher rate decrease than they had previously projected. So we're anticipating 10.812% decrease coming up starting in 26. The main driver here is the debt of Sherco 3 is now rolled off. The last debt payment will be made first part of next year. And so we will see some short-term debt relief. The purpose of these funds, as we've talked about previously, is to rededicate towards debt service for our own bonding. And so we've proposed that as a part of the power cost adjustment. This will pay the debt service on our up to $240 million debt issuance with this rate relief. Those rates step back up going into 29 and 30, those last two tail years. And so there is rate pressures coming back at us from SIMPA as well in their projections.
And I would just warn, when you use the word rates here, there are people who look at that says, yep, my rate's going to come down 10%. And it's just the same thing we talked about earlier. It's difficult to understand how the whole connection fees and then the other things that are on an RPU bill that are not tied to this 10% reduction. So.
Yep. This was an anticipated reduction, and we've had a specific purpose for this reduction that is being repurposed towards debt service to pay our own new builds. So yes, I appreciate that clarification. I think it's important for transparency to talk about it because this is known out there as well, but this is reflected on some of our internal costs, not what the customers will see.
Right. I just worry that I think RPU is very sophisticated when they use the word rate, but it can be a very simple term to just says my bill.
Yeah. SIMPA is considering restructuring how they do the monthly ECA. This would be the planned energy cost adjustment each of the month based off of the known. There's a big Sherco outage in April of next year. So rather than going into April expecting a high energy cost adjustment, they're going to pilot a monthly base rate, which would levelize this. It'll be the same charge by the end of the year, but it would reduce some of the monthly fluctuations, at least the planned monthly fluctuations in the energy cost adjustment. So there is a slight adjustment that will be put in place, we believe, on how the ECA is approached next year, and we should be budgeting like a flat line through the whole year. Variability will come from the normal market variability and cost variability. Nothing to update there. A few key things. We are flying out to San Diego to have our project kickoff meeting for the engine packages for Mount Simon Station. The team has made great progress there on getting the initial contracting done there, and we'll be doing the final work on the engine packages in just 2 short weeks. Like to highlight that on November 12th, we'll be hosting the SIMPA board meeting. Would be welcome for any board members to attend that. It'll be at, I believe, 9 a.m. on Wednesday, November 12th. We are going to host that at the Westside Energy Station. So if you would like to come, please let me know, and we'll make sure that you are on the attendee list there. And I think that's all the short-term opportunities. That's all I have for today.
Any questions? Okay, let's see, division reports and metrics. Any questions about those?
I do have one, actually, and I think it's electric, and it's page 315, where they talk about an outage for over 200 customers. It's underground, and it's 2 minutes. I'm just kind of thrown off. I always think underground things are, much less likely to happen, but take much longer to resolve.
Yeah, one of our line crew members was putting a switch back into service, and while
So
he's
it
pushing
was
an
all
elbow
open.
back on, and it flashed over, the elbow caused the outage, so it was a known issue, so they were able to
Okay.
reposition the switch quickly to get people back
Yeah,
on.
it just jumped out at me as an odd thing. Thank you.
Understand.
It really was an odd thing. I talked to the team afterwards. It was on the North Broadway project. There's a new pole that went up there, and this was actually brand new equipment. So it was a piece of underground infrastructure that was almost new out of the box and had a first time it operated or failure there as they were trying to do some switching. So they were able to find it very quickly because it flashed right in front of them.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, other questions? No? Okay, other business? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned.